Well, my sleepless drifters, welcome back. You found yourself once again tuning into the quiet hum between midnight and memory. This is Night Signals, and I'm your host, your reluctant cartographer of the strange Cliff Reynolds, broadcasting from somewhere just north of ordinary and somewhere just south of sane. Now, for those of you lighting a cigarette on the back porch, staring out over an empty field, or maybe curled up in your truck's cab, riding out a long haul with one ear on the road and the other on the stars, thank you for trusting me with your attention tonight, or this morning, depending on how you measure time out here in the AM drift. It's 12:03 and some change. The static is mild, the weather is holding, and the station clock says we've officially crossed over into the part of the night where shadows get curious. The time when the old stories lean in a little closer and every little sound in your house stops asking what and starts asking who. Now, for those who are new here, this is the show where we don't tell you what to believe. We just open the door and let the truth, or whatever walks like it, wander in. Over the years, I've heard it all. Back in '96, a caller from Kalispell swore he had a Polaroid of a gray standing in a wheat field with its arms at its sides like it was just waiting. Another time, in 2003, a woman from Pascagoula called in crying because a song on the radio had triggered a memory of waking up in a room with lights that hummed inside her bones. And then there was that strange summer when every third call we got was about missing time, strange scars, and silent orbs above the power lines. You know, people say, Cliff, why do you keep doing this? And my answer is always the same, because I've got questions, because I'm not sure we're supposed to sleep through the night so easily, because the silence is full of noise if you just sit still long enough. And as for me, well, I'm doing all right. Took the dog out to the lake this afternoon. He's a black lab named Edison. He's smarter than I am most days, especially when it comes to people. There's a stillness on the lake this time of year that feels premonitory, not calm, more like a breath being held. Anyway, tonight's going to be one of those nights. I've got a guest with us who's been making waves in some very dark corners of the community. He's not just an author, he's an experiencer. And his story, well, let's just say it'll make you leave the porch light on. The Grays, you've heard the name and you've seen the sketches, big heads, black eyes, slender frames. But what are they really? Where do they go when they're not here? And why do so many people keep seeing them, even when they'd give anything to forget? My guest tonight claims it happened to him, not once, not twice, but over a span of 20 years, and he's finally decided to stop being afraid and start talking. We'll get to him in just a minute, but for now, lean back, dim the lights, keep your hands where you can see them, and if something flickers outside the window, don't look too fast. You're listening to Night Signals, and I'll be right here on the other side of the static. All right, we're back. You're listening to Night Signals, the place where daylight ends and the unexplained begins. Joining me tonight is a man whose story you may have skimmed over at the back of a bookstore, tucked between a dusty copy of Communion and a misfiled National Geographic. But I have a feeling after tonight you won't forget his name. His book is titled The Visitors in the Stillness. And it's not just theory, not hearsay. It's a personal ledger of experiences that began in the summer of 1992 and still haven't entirely stopped. Daniel Collier, welcome to Night Signals. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Cliff.
It's good to be here. Though I'll admit, part of me is still nervous talking about this out loud, even after all this time.
Well, you're among friends tonight. Out here, we believe that silence is more dangerous than the truth, so let's start there. What made you decide it was time to come forward? Why now?
Honestly, because I got tired of pretending. Pretending that I hadn't been marked by something I didn't ask for. Pretending that my memories were just dreams, or sleep paralysis, or stress. I kept journals for years, detailed ones, and I was always writing maybe, or seemed like, or felt like. But it wasn't maybe. It was.
Can you take us back to the beginning? What was the first thing you remember? The first real moment that made you realize this wasn't just a strange dream?
It was August 3rd, 1992. I was 21 years old working as a seasonal wilderness guide up in northern Idaho. There was this lake, remote, no roads in, only accessible by hiking or float plane. No other people for miles. No power lines. No radio towers. Just silence. I had set up camp late in the day. The sun had already dipped behind the ridge. And then it got quiet. I know that sounds strange. It's always quiet out there. But this was different. The wind stopped. The birds stopped. Even the mosquitoes vanished. And then there was this vibration. Not a sound exactly. Not at first. But I could feel it, low, steady, like something humming through my bones. I looked up, and there it was. Not a ship, not lights, not yet, just a kind of ripple in the air, like the stars were being seen through water. And then I blinked, and it was morning.
Just like that?
Just like that. I was lying in a different spot. My sleeping bag was unzipped, turned sideways. There were small circular marks on the backs of my calves like they'd scraped something. And I had this phrase stuck in my head, over and over. They were curious. That's all. Just curious. I didn't know where it came from, but it didn't feel like my voice.
Daniel, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, some genuine, some looking for attention, but you're different. You're not trying to convince anyone. You're just sharing. And that's what makes this powerful. And so after that first missing time, did you try to explain it, rationalize it?
Oh, I did everything. I went to a doctor. I told him I might have had a seizure. He ran some blood work, did a basic EEG, nothing. Tried a psychologist. She said it might have been stress or isolation. But I've been in the woods since I was 16. I know stress. I know hallucinations. This wasn't that. It was surgical. Cold. And it left fingerprints. Not just on my skin, but on how I remembered things. And Cliff, it didn't stop there.
We're going to take a slow walk through this, Daniel. No rush, because something tells me the missing time wasn't the most disturbing part.
Not by a long shot.
We're back. You're listening to Night Signals. The radio crackles, the coffee cools, and the truth waits just a little farther than the last street light. If you're just joining us, our guest tonight is Daniel Collier, author of The Visitors in the Stillness, an experiencer of multiple encounters with what many believe are non-human entities commonly referred to as the Greys. We've heard about his first missing time experience, but what comes next? Well, I'll let Daniel walk us through it. Daniel, tell me about the second time.
It happened 3 years later. I had gone back to the same region in Idaho, this time on purpose. Not to tempt fate, not out of curiosity. I was trying to prove to myself that it hadn't happened, that maybe I'd just had a breakdown that summer. I needed to reclaim that place. I brought a camera, an old Hi-8 recorder, tripod, 2 spare batteries, a journal. No cell service back then. Not that it would have helped. The first night was normal. Second night, too. But the third night, something shifted. At around 2:17 a.m., I woke up sitting upright inside my tent. No sound. The air felt pressurized, like I was in a submarine. My breath felt thick, like it had weight to it. And I heard this sound, like dried leaves rubbing together inside my skull. I unzipped the tent. And Cliff? They were standing in the clearing. 3 of them. Thin, about 4 feet tall. Not gray like people say. Not really. More like the color of dry clay under moonlight. Pale with the slightest tinge of blue, like veins just beneath the surface. And the eyes. Everyone talks about the eyes. But you can't understand them until you've seen them. They don't reflect light the way ours do. They seem to absorb it, like they feed on it. No pupils, no whites, just vast black, still, but somehow aware. Looking into those eyes, I didn't feel fear. I felt removed, like I had become an object. Not prey, not a threat, just a thing. And then one of them tilted its head, just a few degrees, and I felt the movement before I saw it, like the signal had entered my mind before my eyes caught up. I couldn't move, not from fear, something else, like my limbs had been disconnected. I could see steam rising from my mouth in the cold air, but I couldn't hear myself breathing. Everything was muted, like the forest was under glass. The one closest to me raised a hand, 3 fingers, long, smooth, almost insect-like. And in that moment, something passed between us. Not words, not pictures, but intent, recognition. And then they were gone.
Just like that?
No lights, no craft, no dramatic departure. One moment they were there, the next, the clearing was empty. No sound of them leaving, no branches breaking, just stillness.
Daniel, did the camera catch any of it?
Number. That's the thing. I had left it running on the tripod, pointed at the fire ring. The battery should have lasted another hour, but the tape had stopped at exactly 2:12 a.m., 5 minutes before I woke up. And when I played it back later, there was this burst of static about 20 seconds before the cutoff. Just a flicker, but there was a shape, a blur in the tree line. I showed it to a friend who does video analysis. He said it looked like a compression artifact. But it wasn't. It was too symmetrical.
So now it's not just memories. There's something on tape, not enough to prove, but enough to haunt.
Exactly. It was the first time I realized I wasn't just remembering. Something wanted me to remember.
We're back. Midnight has softened its grip, but the sky's still wide open and the signals are still strong. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and you're listening to Night Signals, the broadcast for those who wake with questions and sleep with one eye open. Our guest tonight is Daniel Collier, author, wilderness guide, and experiencer. If you've been with us from the beginning, you've heard the haunting clarity in his voice as he recounted not just one, but 2 close encounters with what he and many others believe to be the Greys. But sometimes the hardest part of these stories isn't what happens during the event. It's what comes afterward, when the stars are quiet again and the world expects you to forget. Daniel, let's talk about what followed.
Yeah. After the second encounter, I thought maybe that was it. Like maybe they'd gotten what they came for and I could move on. But that's when the real changes started. It began with the dreams. They were always the same. A white room, round, seamless, no shadows. I'm lying on a table that feels cold, but not metallic. There's a sound in the background. High, almost insectile, like a soft keening. And above me, those eyes. But here's the strange part, Cliff. They weren't always looking at me. Sometimes in the dreams, I felt like I was them, like I was watching through their eyes, observing myself from the outside, detached, clinical.
Like your perspective was reversed?
Exactly. It's hard to explain without sounding completely insane. But it was like they'd left a mirror in my mind, one that only worked when I was asleep. And there were physical things, too. I started waking up with nosebleeds, always in the early hours, around 3:10 a.m. I'd go to bed fine and wake up with dried blood on my upper lip, sometimes on the pillowcase. My doctor ran tests, nothing conclusive. Sinus sensitivity, maybe, dry air, stress. But I knew better. One night, I found a small scar behind my left ear. A perfect crescent, maybe a centimeter long. I hadn't injured myself. No cut, no surgery. It just appeared. And then there was the sound.
Sound?
Yeah. It started as a hum. Low. Vibrating. Like it was coming from inside my skull. Not constant. Intermittent. It would come at night. Mostly when I was alone. And every time it came, I'd get this image in my head. A pattern. 3 concentric rings with a triangle through the center. I drew it dozens of times in my journal. I didn't know what it meant, but it felt placed, not imagined. Eventually, I took it to someone, an old anthropology professor I used to know. He studied sacred geometry, ancient symbols. When I showed him the sketch, he went pale. Said it resembled a motif found in certain pre-dynastic temple ruins near Abydos in Egypt. But the odd thing was, those patterns had only been discovered after LIDAR scans in the 2000s, years after I'd first drawn them.
So let me get this straight. You were dreaming in a symbol that didn't yet publicly exist.
That's what I'm saying. I couldn't have known about it. No one could have. Not unless the information didn't come from me.
Daniel, I've heard similar things over the years of people who say they received something, information, language, math, something coded, not spoken but implanted. Do you believe they left you with a message?
I do. But it wasn't a message in the way we think. It wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to unfold over time. The dreams, the hum, the drawings. They were like echoes of a signal. And I think I was just the receiver.
And that signal is still active?
Some nights, yeah. I'll be sitting in my cabin, miles from anywhere, and I'll feel it. Not hear it. Feel it. Like a finger brushing the inside of my skull. And when it comes, I don't feel fear anymore. I feel like someone's checking in.
Welcome back. You're tuned to Night Signals, and if you're still with us, you're part of a conversation most people would rather pretend never existed. Tonight, we're speaking with Daniel Collier, author of The Visitors in the Stillness, a man who's spent decades trying to make sense of encounters that have left marks on his skin, fractures in his memory, and something far stranger in his dreams. Daniel, we've talked about the first encounter, the second, and the aftermath, but you hinted earlier at something more recent, something you remember completely.
Yes. This happened in 2011. By then, I was living full-time off-grid in Montana. No power, no internet, no phone lines. Just a solar rig and a shortwave radio. I'd gone there to get away from it all. But in hindsight, maybe I was just getting closer. It happened on a night when the stars were too clear. I don't know how else to describe it. The sky had that kind of impossible stillness, like everything was holding its breath. I had just doused the fire and gone inside when I felt it. Not a sound, not a vibration this time, but a pull, like gravity had shifted and it was tugging sideways. And then I was standing outside, fully awake, fully alert. Not in my bed, just there, outside the cabin, barefoot in the snow, with no memory of walking out. In front of me was something. It hovered maybe 10 feet off the ground. No lights, no engines, just a matte, black, ovoid shape. It didn't glow. It didn't hum. It absorbed the night around it. There was a shimmer along the edges, as if it wasn't quite real, like it was being rendered from a projection. I tried to run, but my body didn't move. I could feel my heart pounding, my breath catching in my throat, but my limbs were locked. Then a beam, not a light, more like A corridor of distortion swept over me. And I wasn't in Montana anymore.
Where were you?
Inside a space that felt larger than the craft I'd seen. It was impossible. The interior had no seams. The walls were smooth, silvery gray, but the light had no source. It was ambient, like the air itself glowed. The floor wasn't solid. It shimmered beneath my feet, like I was walking on the surface of water that didn't move. There were others, not people, not the grays at first, but tall shadows, silhouettes just beyond the curve of my vision, observing, watching. I never saw them directly, but I knew they were there. And then they came, 3 of them. Same as before, same impossible stillness, same unreadable expressions. One of them came close, so close I could see tiny grooves in its skin, like etched channels. Its head tilted, and this time I heard something, not with my ears, inside my head, like an idea that had always been there, but had just now finished forming. It said, "You are not separate." That's it, just that. But the words came with images, star maps, DNA spirals, time loops folding in on themselves. I felt like I had lived years in that instant, not as myself, but as someone else, something else. And then I was back in the cabin, sitting on the floor in front of the wood stove. The fire had burned out. The clock on the wall was blinking 12:00. Every single device in the cabin had reset. Solar battery, shortwave radio, even my watch. And I remembered everything.
No missing time?
Number, not a gap, not a blur. It was seared into me, like a second life pressed down over the first.
Daniel, I've spoken to dozens of experiencers, but very few remember that level of detail. What do you think changed? Why that night?
Because I think they let me. Or maybe they wanted me to. I believe that was the night they stopped testing and started revealing not just who they are, but what we are too.
You're listening to Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds, riding the strange frequencies with you into the deeper hours. And if your lights are still on, you're going to want to keep them that way. Our guest is Daniel Collier, author, wilderness guide, and experiencer. And if you've been following along tonight, you've heard some of the most vivid and unsettling first-hand accounts I've ever heard on this program. But now we shift gears because experiences like this, they don't just leave scars, they leave questions. And if you live with them long enough, they start to stitch themselves into patterns. Daniel, I want to ask you the big one. What do you think the grays are?
I've asked myself that same question every day for the past 30 years. And I've landed on something that might not be satisfying, but I believe it's honest. I don't think the grays are one thing. I think they're tools, not machines, not robots, but something in between. Biological vessels, yes, but not autonomous. More like interfaces, constructs. Cliff, I never once felt like the being standing in front of me was the source of the intelligence. They were enacting something, like puppets, but the strings weren't physical.
You think they're controlled?
I think they're projected by something else, something behind them. Their movements are too smooth, their eyes are too uniform, and they don't express anything. No confusion, no hesitation, just function. I think they're biological drones. And I think whoever or whatever controls them is far beyond what we can imagine.
Are we talking extraterrestrial, interdimensional, something else?
That's the thing. At first, I assumed aliens. That's what we've all been trained to think. But over the years, the words stopped fitting. They don't arrive the way travelers do. There's no visible entry, They appear like thoughts, like projections from another layer of reality. I started to suspect they weren't from somewhere else, but from under something, a deeper substrate, not outer space, inner space. Call it dimensional, call it quantum. I don't have the language for it, but I've had moments during those encounters where time fractured, where I saw myself as a child, as an old man, as something not even human. And I think the grays are the thin edge of the wedge, the safe layer we're allowed to see, because the thing behind them, it's not anthropomorphic. It doesn't care if we're afraid. It doesn't think in emotions. It thinks in outcomes.
So, in your view, these beings, they're not here to invade or destroy.
They're not violent in the traditional sense. They're extractive. They're harvesting. Not crops, not blood, not even DNA. They're harvesting moments, experiences, memory, subjective consciousness. Like we're being cataloged, sampled, filed away. And that's why they never give you the full truth. Because the moment you think you understand it, you stop generating the emotional complexity they're observing.
So, you believe we're a kind of case study?
A study, a simulation, a cultivation. Pick your metaphor. But yes, something is watching. Not just the grays, something through them.
And what about the others? You mentioned shadows during your onboard memory. Have you ever seen something that wasn't a gray?
Yes. Once. It wasn't shaped like us. It wasn't shaped like them either. It looked like a silhouette, but with depth, like looking into a tunnel made of smoke and geometry. It never moved, never blinked. But when I stood near it, every thought in my head rearranged itself. Not involuntarily, cooperatively. And Cliff, I don't think it noticed me. And that terrified me more than anything else. Because I realized the grays notice us. But that thing doesn't even need to.
So in your mind, the grays aren't the story, they're the wrapping paper.
Exactly. They're the safe shape, the form that doesn't burn out our sanity. But every now and then, the mask slips, and we see what's really looking through. And when you do, you don't sleep the same ever again.
Welcome back to Night Signals. It's the hour of long shadows now, where the static on the line feels almost intentional, and even the trees outside start to lean in just a little. I'm Cliff Reynolds, and tonight we're in deep, and our guest, Daniel Collier, has taken us from remote wilderness clearings to the unsettling corridors of non-human memory. He's looked into the eyes of the grays and caught a glimpse, just a glimpse, of what might be behind them. But these kinds of encounters don't end when the beings leave. Sometimes the aftermath is just as disorienting as the event itself. Daniel, what's it been like carrying all of this? How has it changed your life?
Cliff, I don't think I've lived a normal day since 1992. Even on the surface, when I'm grocery shopping or paying bills, there's a part of me that's still there.
In that clearing, or that room, or wherever they pulled me.
I've lost friends. Relationships don't last. I've tried to explain a few times, always carefully. But people either look at you with pity or with fear. And honestly, I can't blame them. I sleep with blackout curtains. I don't use a smartphone, no smart devices, no Alexa, no Siri. I keep a wood stove burning through winter, even when the electric heater works fine, because I need the old ways to ground me. But even then, I still feel it.
What do you mean?
The watching. Not just the grays, that I could almost come to terms with, but I mean here, Earthside, human eyes. It started about a year after I went public with the book. A man came into the co-op where I buy grain and canned goods. Said he'd read the book. Didn't say much, just stared. He had this calmness about him that wasn't calm. It was clinical. When I tried to ask where he was from, he just smiled and said, "The signal finds you when it's time." Then he walked out. Never came back. I've seen people in parked cars outside my cabin. No plates, or government tags where plates should be. I get mail with no return address. Envelopes that are empty. Just a blank page inside. And once my trail cams, which I only use for wildlife, caught a man in a suit standing at the tree line at 3:14 a.m. Just standing, facing the cabin. And here's the kicker. He never moved, from frame to frame, for 6 minutes. Not even a twitch.
Do you believe these people are with the government?
I used to. But now, I think some are, and some aren't. Some feel like watchers of the watchers. There's this theory among some experiencers that there's a human faction that already knows everything. Not the Pentagon, not the politicians, deeper, older. They don't want to stop the encounters. They want to monitor how we respond to them. They're not tracking the Greys. They're tracking us.
So it's not just the phenomena you're surviving, it's the pressure from your own species.
Exactly. When I first started writing the book, I thought I was telling a story about being taken. Now I realize I was flagging myself, marking myself for observation, like raising a hand in a room full of silence. And since then, I've met others, other experiencers, at conferences, on back roads, through encrypted email. They all have the same look in their eyes, haunted but calm, like they've seen something so big it made everything else seem irrelevant. And they've all said the same thing in their own way. They know we know.
That's a heavy truth, Daniel. And I've got to ask, with everything you've seen and everything that's followed, do you regret coming forward?
Sometimes, but only for myself, not for the message. Because if even one person hears this and says, "That sounds like what happened to me," then maybe they won't feel so alone. And maybe that's what the Greys never understood. Or maybe what they did. That no matter how fragmented we become, truth has a way of stitching us back together, even if it leaves scars.
All right, night travelers, you've been listening to Night Signals, and I know your hands are hovering near the phone, your fingers tracing numbers you're not sure you want to dial. Well, now's your chance. The lines are open. If you've had an experience, seen something you can't explain, or maybe you've read Daniel's book and felt that shiver of recognition, give us a call. As always, we ask that you keep it respectful, keep it focused, and if your voice trembles a little, don't worry, so does mine. First caller, line 2. You're on the air.
Hi. Cliff, long-time listener, first-time caller. And Daniel, thank you for what you're sharing. I just wanted to say, I've never told anyone this, but when I was 15, I used to have this dream. Same one, over and over. I was in a round white room. No corners, no doors, just light. And they were there. Not scary exactly, but watching. And the thing that really got me tonight was when Daniel said he could see through their eyes. Because in the dream, at the end, I'd wake up with this memory of seeing myself from the ceiling, like I was above my own body. I thought I was crazy. But now I don't know.
You're not crazy. You're remembering something that wasn't meant to be remembered. That image from above, it's common. It's how they perceive us. Not from one angle, from all at once.
Caller, thank you for your bravery. You're not alone. Next caller, line 4.
Yeah, Cliff. This is Denny from Eastern Oregon. I used to work as a lineman for the utility company. Out in the high desert, you see a lot of sky. In 1998, I was out by myself late one evening, fixing a downed line near Burns. Something flew over. No sound. Just a shadow. But the weird part? My flashlight went dead. My watch stopped. And my fillings buzzed. Like metal vibrating against bone. I didn't see grays, but I saw 3 shapes on a ridge, watching. When I looked again, they were gone. And the clock on my truck reset to 3:14 a.m.
Same time Daniel mentioned earlier. That's more than coincidence. Daniel?
That time comes up again and again. 3:14 a.m. Pi. A symbol of endless, non-repeating complexity. I think it's a marker, a way of showing us we've slipped outside the expected pattern.
Denny, thanks for the call. Let's go to line 1.
Daniel, the symbol you described, 3 concentric rings, a triangle through the middle. You should check the plaster behind the wall in your cabin, north-facing side, 4 feet from the stove. It's been there since you moved in.
Sir, can you repeat that?
Check the wall. There's something underneath. We're all just data in their archive, Daniel. Some of us are reference copies. You're one of them. They don't need to visit anymore. They're already in.
We appear to have lost that line. Daniel, did that make any sense to you?
Yes. Too much. That side of the cabin, it's colder than the others. I always thought it was just poor insulation. I'm going to look.
All right, one more call tonight before we go to break. Line 3.
Cliff, I just wanted to say, I read Daniel's book 6 months ago. Since then, I've had dreams I never had before. And last week, I woke up with his symbol drawn on my bathroom mirror. With condensation, I live alone.
You didn't bring the experience to the book. The book brought the experience to you.
That's the part I never anticipated. The Greys don't care about time. They don't even care about sequence. For them, awareness is the doorway. The moment you understand the pattern, you're inside it.
Welcome back to Night Signals. It's 2:38 in the morning, and if you're still with us, you've either seen something strange or you're about to. Our guest tonight is Daniel Collier, author of The Visitors in the Stillness and experiencer of encounters with non-human entities commonly referred to as the Greys. We've heard accounts that stretch across time, memory, and dimension, and they've stirred a lot of responses. Now, not everyone who listens to this show is a believer. Some tune in to challenge it, and that's okay. Doubt is healthy, even necessary, which brings us to our next caller. Line 4, go ahead, you're on Night Signals.
Yeah, this is Matt from Spokane. Cliff, I've listened to your show for years, and tonight's guest, well, I gotta say, I'm not buying it. All this stuff about time loops, symbols, being taken aboard craft. Come on. If this really happened, where's the proof? People get abducted, they come back with stories, but never evidence. Just feelings, drawings, and blurry memories. Daniel, if this is all true, why don't you show us something real?
Fair question, Matt. Daniel?
Matt, I don't blame you. Skepticism's not the enemy. Indifference is. You want something real? Okay. Go to the west side of Fairview Ridge. There's a decommissioned fire watch tower there, elevation 6,240 feet. About 30 feet northwest of the base, you'll find a flat stone with 3 concentric rings carved into it. They weren't there in 2005, but they're there now, and if you bring a compass to that spot, it won't point north. It'll spin, slowly, only in that spot. No metal in the ground, no explanation. I didn't carve those rings, Matt. I found them after one of the dreams. Drew the location without knowing why. When I went there, it was already marked.
That's oddly specific.
It has to be. You want more? Ask Dr. Naomi Kessler at St. Helena Regional Hospital. She's the one who scanned the object under my left shoulder blade in 2013. Tiny, metallic, non-organic. Too small to be a microchip, too symmetrical to be debris. No scar where it should have entered. She still doesn't talk about it. I never asked to prove this, Matt. But I've lived it, and I've bled for it.
All right, maybe I'll take a hike up that ridge myself.
I hope you do. Just be ready for what happens after.
And there it is, Matt. I appreciate the call. Doubt's not the end of the road. It's just one of the turns. Daniel, that was chillingly specific.
The truth doesn't need to shout, Cliff. It just waits patiently in the places people don't want to look.
Well said. We're almost out of time, folks, but I'll leave you with this. The line between belief and denial is razor thin, and sometimes all it takes to cross it is one detail too specific to ignore. So if you head out to that ridge, pack light, and don't forget a compass. You just might find what you weren't looking for. This has been Night Signals. I'm Cliff Reynolds. Good night, and keep watching the dark.